record. And now I'm going to share Photoshop. So you guys can see Photoshop now? Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, cool. All right. So I've got some files here, and it's from one of the days where we went out and took photographs. This is the only one that's not. So it's just a figure of Henry. So I'll open that one up. Now, the first thing I'll do here is I'll just I'm going to change this so that you can see.
Yeah.
So sometimes what happens is, in general, when you took your own photographs, I got you to set the setting on the camera as a JPEG. So it should just open straight up into Photoshop.
Not long to go.
If it
Not long
opens,
to go.
what's that?
Oh, that's all right. I was talking to Michael.
Oh, okay. If you end up that an image opens up and you get a window like this, it just means that it's a raw file, and so it opens it up in a slightly different program, and this lets you go and play around with the exposure and all sorts of things. This is actually a really, really good process if you bring a photo in and it's under or overexposed. So if we look, and I won't really mess around on this too much, but if we look at the shadows around here, instead of changing the exposure, I can do this, where I can knock the shadows right down, and I can bump the blacks up rather than changing the exposure. And I've got stuff down here where it's texture and clarity. So this is kind of the sharpening of the image. Once you've got what you want, or if you don't mess around with any of these tools at all. And the other thing I'll show you here is you've got these icons across the bottom. And these are quite good because you can split the image to view it. So this will, you can still hold the spacebar down and move it around. And if you keep clicking it, it'll go through and give you various options. You can look at it horizontally. This one, you can actually see the split through the middle, what it was before, what it is after. So,
I'm sorry, how do you get onto that screen?
Oh, if usually it only happens if you're using a raw file, but if you actually have a JPEG and you still want to go in there, it's under filter, and you go to camera raw filter. It's like using another program called Lightroom, except Photoshop has incorporated this into it now.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. If you've got a JPEG and with the level we're at, I'll just cancel out of that. We can use functionality on Photoshop. So we're going to try and keep things reasonably simple, because I know that some of you haven't used Photoshop at all. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a quick breakdown with the tools. So essentially, the top few tools in the toolbar here, it's about selecting something. So dragging around, selecting an area, cropping, drawing on shapes. The eyedropper and the paintbrush tools are more about cloning, retouching, erasing, that sort of thing. And then as you go down from there, you end up with some slightly odder, more specialist ones, you know, putting in a graduated fill, using a type tool, dodge and burn and smudging and things like that. And across the top menu, this similar sort of breakdown. File is just bringing things in, so opening up files, closing it. Edit will give you things where it's about filling, transforming, rotating. Image is the main one that we'll end up using. This is when we start to tidy up an image. Layer, we'll get into this a little bit with the masking. And then again, we're going down into more specialist stuff. Typography, a different kind of selection, filtering, so all your special effects. At the moment, steer clear of that stuff. Otherwise, you'll get stuff that's just way too bizarre. 3D, other options. So let's focus on this one for a start. So under image, you've got mode. So basically, whether you want RGB, an image for screen, CMYK, an image for print, grayscales, black and white, that sort of thing. The adjustments is the main one we're going to look at. The auto ones, we'll do it ourselves. Changing the image and canvas size, we'll get to that when we need to. Now, the most important thing about Photoshop, the bit that we really want you to get used to, is using it in a non-destructive fashion. So all of these options that were up here under image, if I use them on this image, they're stuck on that image, I can't change them. But what you'll see is under the layer palette, any palettes you don't have, you can find them under the window and switch them on. You'll see at the bottom, you have a quick mask option, and you have this one that says create an adjustment layer. And this is what we want. If I click on this, those same options that we were just looking at will come up. And we have brightness and contrast levels, curves, exposure, a whole lot of stuff. Essentially, this is what we're going to use to tidy up the image. This is what we're going to use if we want to change the color of it. And then down the bottom, kind of special effects stuff as well. This stuff up here, we'll hardly ever touch. So brightness and contrast, and I'll just Command plus on here. It's going to enlarge the image. If I use the space bar, I'll get this hand tool and I can move it around. So an adjustment layer, and brightness and contrast is a pretty straightforward option. And you can see if you look at the image, brightening it, darkening it, giving it more or less contrast. I'm going to select that and chuck it on the little trash can. Gets rid of it, I don't want it. Because the one we'll use is levels. It's the easiest one to use. Curves is a slightly more complicated version. But what it does is, what we were just doing before is the same as moving the white slider in and the black slider. It gives more contrast. So very simply, you're limiting the whites. So the more I move that slider in, the brighter it's going to get, because it's now saying from black to white is just within that area. So it's kind of, so the grays, the middle grays, this was middle gray before, is now white. So if you look at the ocean, that's now white. If I move it all the way back, it's middle gray. And the same with this, you're just constricting it. So if this is middle gray, that bit through there, you watch as I move the slider in, it becomes a lot darker. The middle slider is just changing the gray values. So an image like this, my screen's a bit dirty actually, but I'll have a go. I lighten it off a bit, bump it, give it a little bit more contrast. And I can close that. Because it's a non-destructive layer now, I can just switch the eye off and on, and I can see the difference that I've made to the image. The nice thing is that image is the way it's in its original form. So if I don't like what I've done, I just need to dump it, delete it in the trash can, or just switch off the eye. If I go to, I'll switch that one off. If I now go to curves, it's the same as the levels, but more complicated. So it basically, to give more contrast, I'd pull that down and push it up. So stronger whites and lessening off the blacks and S curve. The reason that curves is considered better is because on the levels you only had 3 sliders, but you can see that you can put in as many points as you want. So it's giving you multiple sliders in comparison to levels. I would say for our purposes, just stick to the levels, because it's simpler and easier to use, and it'll still give you a good job. Now that's kind of getting it right there. We've got hue, saturation, vibrance, color balance. Let's go to hue and saturation. So now with this slider, if I move the hue, the colors are going to change through the image. If I bring that back to 0, saturation, increasing the intensity, and taking it down takes it more to black and white. Lightness and darkness, okay, lightening it, darkening it. The thing that I like about hue and saturation is that you have this thing called colorize. Colorize can give you a really beautiful effect. If I click it, it's like a monochromatic image, and now I can cycle through the slider. So for instance, let's say we want something that's like a sepia tone. I get it so it's looking kind of reddy brown. I can drop it off. Maybe I'll darken it slightly. Maybe the red down here is a bit better. And you can, okay, look, we can hold down the eye icon and see what it was. I've changed the preview button. Okay, so you can get this quite nice effect from using colorize. I'm going to get rid of that, and we'll have a look at one more. So there are simpler options here as well, like photo filter. It'll give you a whole lot of options. Color balance, just moving the sliders. So do I want the image to push more towards cyan or blue? Do I want it to go towards red? More magenta. So you can essentially warm up or cool images down using this kind of quality. I'm going to leave that stuff. Well, actually, I'm going to dump it. I don't know that I need to do that. Now the other thing here is, so you can go through and you can kind of enhance the quality of the images. The only other thing that can be really good, and what I'll do is if I grab the image of Henry and I chuck it on the new file icon and switch it off, it's just given me another version of it. Because what I'm going to do to this top image, so I click on it, you can always see with the boundary which one's on. I'm going to use something under the filter. There's a section called sharpen, and the one that I want to use is called Unsharp Mask. This is incredibly good when you want to give your images just a wee bit of zing. The formula for this is the threshold, always leave it on 0. The radius, leave it on 1. And if it's an average photo, you can you probably have the amount on about 90. If it's a really, really good photo, like you've got a good camera, it's taken a beautiful image, then you would have it down at about between 30 and 50. Again, you can switch the preview on and off, and that will show you what's happening to the image in the background here. If you want to see it closer up, then I can click with the square. I can zoom in a little bit if I want. And when I click and hold down, it shows me what it was. Let go, it shows me what it is. So you can see when it's up close, click, just see how it just kind of clicking on and off. It's like bringing it into focus slightly. Now what Unsharp Mask does, going to go okay, is, so it's also called USM, if you look it up online. And what it means is instead of sharpening everything, I think what it does is it just kind of sharpens the blacks and leaves the colors alone. And so instead of getting the crude effect that you usually get with sharpening, it just touches the images up really nicely. So once I've got an image like that, so I've played around with the adjustments with the levels to tidy it up. I've modified the color if I want to. I've sharpened it slightly. Then the next thing we're going to look at essentially is masking, making a selection. You'll find sometimes when you first bring your image in that it'll have a lock beside it. If you want to start masking and all that sort of stuff, just switch the lock off. Okay, make sure it's unlocked. Otherwise, it won't let you add a mask onto it. So there's a tool within Photoshop now, which is really, really good, and it's this one called Object Selection Tool. And if I click and hold down, the Quick Mask Selection Tool is really good as well. And you'll find those tutorials that are in the folder. I've done all the masking manually. So I've gone in and literally drawn around the object, but the selection tools are getting more and more sophisticated. So with this one, if I, oh, damn, it's on the lasso one. You've got the option here. When you pick anything from this toolbar, it changes the settings across the top. And at the moment, I've got it on lasso. Usually it starts off on rectangle. So lasso will let me drag around, and when I let go, it joins it up. The rectangle, obviously it just, if I click and drag, it draws a rectangle around the figure. And you'll see it's done a really, really good job of working out what the object is that I want to select. Once I have something like that, there's, oops, I'm on the wrong layer. So it wasn't giving me this option up here because I was selecting it, but on the wrong layer. So now that I've got that clicked, there's a mode that says select and mask. If I click on that, what this is really good for, if I Command plus, and I look at Henry's here, there's a few selections around here. One of them is to click on what's referred to as Smart Radius. And this is just your viewing. So it's like, do I want to see it on a transparent background? As a selection on on white, that didn't really do anything. On black, oh, okay, it's just tinted slightly. I'm just going to leave it as overlay. The red is identifying the mask. Now, over on the window here, we've got this tool here that's called Refine the Edge. If I use the right and left square brackets, and that either reduces or enlarges my brush size, I can draw around the edge of this here. And you'll see it's trying to select the edge of that here. With what we're doing, this is the functionality that I'd get you to use. There's other ways that you can select around here, but it gets really, really complicated. I'm going to go down the bottom. You'll see there's bits here where it says it'll smooth the mask, it'll feather, which means soften, or shift the edge. Can be quite a good one. So if I move it, you can see, if you look around this area here, you can see that if I expand it out, pushing that mask out, if I move it in, it's actually sucking it into the face. I'm going to just leave it on 0 at the moment. And if I scroll down the bottom, I've got an option here that says, what do you want to output to? And there's one that says a new layer with a mask. So if I go okay to that, and okay, it's given me a new layer with a mask. I can have this one switched off now. I can either just chuck it in the trash can and delete it. Now, it's hard to see what's going on. So what I do is, if I click again on the adjustment layers, I'll get one that's called solid color. And I just pick a color, chuck it in. To move layers around, I just hold down on it and drag it where I want it. Now, what this does is it lets me see where things have gone a bit buggy. And this again is the most important factor that I want you guys to get used to, is with a mask. A mask is, if it's pure black, it blocks the image. If it's pure white, it lets it show through. So if I look at this, where the figure's white, I can see it. Where it's black, I can't see it, and it lets me see the blue. So if I click on this, and this is the thing, always watch the square, otherwise you're painting with the color on your image. If I'm on the mask, and I can click on the paintbrush tool, up here I can click on the brush, and the size I know I can change with the left and right square bracket. The hardness, usually I have that about 85. And what that does is it gives me a brush that has a slightly softened edge, but it's pretty clear. Now some quick keys here. Let's just change it to a color. If you hit the D key, it changes this to pure white and pure black. This one is the foreground color and the other is the background color. So D, you know that you're using pure black and white. X, if I hit the X key, every time I hit it, it swaps around the foreground and background color. So with the foreground color as black, I know that if I paint now, I can paint out those bits that I don't want. And I can get, okay, a nice edge all around here. Now, the nice thing, again, this is the whole thing about being non-destructive. If I go too far, if I make a mistake or I slip and I go into this image, all I have to do is swap the colors to white and paint, because white isn't masking, it lets me see the image. So I can paint that back in, X, now I can come in and refine that edge because I'm using black. So it is a really beautiful feature. In this case, if I want to soften the brush right off, take out some of those extra bits around the hair, maybe I'll knock that off altogether. You can see the brush is a little bit softer. And with this, it's probably too fine to see it at the moment. So let's do something drastic for a minute. If I click on the image and I go to exposure, and I do that. If this image, this function, sorry, it's down here, it's affected everything underneath it. It's affected Henry and it's affected the blue. So once I start getting multiple layers, if I only want whatever's above to affect Henry, I hold down the Option key. And when I go in between those two layers, it gives me a little square with an arrow. And it's called a clipping layer. So now when I switch it on and off, it's only going to affect Henry. It's not going to affect the blue in the background. So I'm going to drag that to the trash. I don't want it. And so with the levels, I don't want it to affect the background, Option, and I just clip it. It's now only having an effect on Henry. So, so with what we're doing, fundamentally, the most important thing is what we've done so far, is this kind of non-destructive adjustment layer and doing a mask. Now, I'll just show you quickly here. If I go back up to image, and I go to canvas size, I can change the size of this image if I want. The circle just means where are you going to extend that from. So let's say if I want to make this image a little bit taller, then I'm going to start from the bottom. So from here, it's going to expand out. Do I want the width to change? I might make it a little bit thinner. Height, might make it a little taller. Go OK. And it's done it. I'm going to use the cropping tool, just a quick way to make it smaller again. It was just to show you how to change the canvas size. Move it and then hit return. And it's made it smaller. So I've got a few other images here. So I'm just going to open them quickly. So one of the images you were using was the, took on that day was the bucket. So I'll open it. It's just a JPEG, so it's opened up in Photoshop again. I'm going to get the object selection tool, see what it does with these buckets. And I've got that. This time I'm not going to go into the select and mask. I'm just going to click it so it's unlocked. And this little layer down here, the quick mask, once I have a selection, if I hit that, it's going to add that mask. Now, if I enlarge up on this image, what you're going to see is that it's selected around the outside, but it hasn't actually selected any of the white on the inside. So if I change this now to the quick selection tool where it looks like a paintbrush, and I drag, shift, if I want to add more white, it's selecting these other white areas. If it goes too far, I can hold down the Option key instead of the Shift, and it will delete from that selection. Shift will add, Option will delete. Again, with the mask, I can click on the mask or the channel.
Did you get it?
I can check with D and using X that my foreground color is black. And now when you fill things, and this is another quick key thing that you'll get used to, usually you go edit, fill. Do you want to fill it with the background or the foreground color, or what color do you want to choose, or black or white, blah, blah, blah. If you hold down Option and delete, it fills with the foreground color. If you hold down Command and delete, it fills with the background color. So here, I'm on my mask, I want to fill it with black, so I just go Option, delete. You can see it's still got that selection. So when you want to get rid of the selection, you just go Command D, which is deselect. And up here at the tab, actually I should be able to do it with the arrow keys. If I drag that layer from the bucket, and I go find Henry, go over the tab.
You will end up doing using it and being
No, it's not going to do it, unfortunately. I think there's something a bit funny with the program I've got. So what I do is I grab that tab, the bucket, I drag it, so I can see the image underneath, and with the arrow tools,
Did you pay for overnight?
I just drag it over,
just
go
normal.
okay if it asks anything.
Maybe nobody's ordering, so they're like, how?
And you can see the problem here is when it's brought it in, because of what I've had it selected as, it's actually clipped it to Henry. So if I hold down the Option key, I can unclip it. Drag it up the top. Option key, I'm going to click that level, so it's just affecting Henry again. And I can move this around with the arrow key. Command T brings in these edit functions, see free transform, the Command T, and if I drag on the corners, it's going to make it bigger or smaller. I have to go Command minus so that I can see the edges. When I'm happy with it, I can hit return. And it's put it there. So now what we're going to do, like using the masking, we can start to blend these images together. So if I click on the mask beside the buckets, I get a paintbrush. I make it as soft as I can. I use the right square bracket to enlarge the brush a little bit. If I paint, it's going to remove it so that I can see Henry. Now the thing here is that you can see it showing the blue background. So I'm going to go Command Z, which is undo. If I want to control it a little bit more, and this is this is where it starts getting a wee bit tricky. If I hold down the Command key and I click on the mask beside Henry, can you see it's brought up his selection? So it's only going to paint or do whatever I'm going to do within that outline of Henry. But if while I've got that selection, if I click on the mask beside the buckets, it's going to let me hide that image of the buckets, but it's not going to let me go outside the selection of Henry. So it means I can control it. And what I'm going to do here is I'll get rid of the black and I'll just soften it at the shoulder. So what I've done here, if I enlarge up on it, is I've just softened it down so the bucket looks like it's kind of going under his chin a wee bit. If I make that smaller, I can just soften that bit there so it really does look like it's coming out of his chin. Command D, then I want to get rid of that selection. Remember, black and white, if there's things I want to tidy up, so if I want to come up here, black is going to hide it. I don't want a perfectly soft brush, so I'll take it back up to about 80 something. And I can paint out that bit of blue. Sorry, paint out that image so I can see the blue underneath. Same with this, if I want to make the brush smaller, I can paint out areas that I don't want. And if I make a mistake, like if I go too far here, X to change it to white, and paint it back in. The biggest mistake that people make is not being on the right layer. If you're on this one, then when I paint with white, I'm actually going to be painting destructively, if I hide that, on the image rather than on the mask. And that's usually where people get wrong. So always look at what this frame is around. So if I have a look at another one, open up this lizard image, see how the object selection tool goes around this one. It's a pretty good job. There's a couple of bits here where it selected off the object. So if I go to the brush selection tool, go hold down Option, I can minus that selection. And some of these more standard selection tools, like there's a square, oh sorry, not the square marquee, the lasso tool with Shift, it'll add to a selection. So you're just drawing on the selection. So Option, if I draw around it and let go, it's taken that selection out. So with that, I'll unlock it again, make a quick mask. And you know, with the brushes, I can go in and tidy this stuff up if I want, but at the moment I'm just going to grab it, move that tab over, get the arrow key, chuck it on and go okay. And with the layers, I want it behind Henry, so I'm just going to chuck it, drag it down behind him. And it's gone a bit too far. I don't want to see it out this side. So if I get that lasso tool, well, actually I'll click and I'll leave that. I'll use the square one actually. It's still just a selection tool. If I drag around that area, I make sure I'm on the mask. Black is going to block the image. So this time black is the background color. So if I hold down Command, hit delete, you can see what it's done on the mask. It's chopped it out. Command D, It's fine. And this would be a bit where I'd say, oh, okay, look, it looks a bit dark. So I'm going to click on the layer, go to, whoops, I bumped the wrong one. Go to levels. And I'm just going to lighten it up a bit. Maybe I went a wee bit too far. And actually, I've got the levels there. Oh, that was the one that I bumped before. But I might actually bring in. I might colorize this. So I'll go to hue and saturation. If I click on this little hand, it will let me select. Kind of clips in on a certain area. So when I change the colors, I'm only changing it on the areas I've selected. Actually, that's not so great on that image. So with this one, I'm going to go colorize. And I'm going to close it for a second. And this is so that I can clip those two together. Because what I want to do is when I double click on the hue and saturation and go colorize, I'm trying to get it so it's closer to the blue in the background. Maybe I'll lighten it, try lightening it off a bit. And I'll go with that. Close it. And so it's trying to match those things up a little bit. Again, so let's say with this bit down the bottom, I might click on the mask of Henry. Get a soft brush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to soften the join between his shirt. So I'm going to mask him out using black so that we can see the lizard coming in. Now, the other thing is everything so far has been on 100% opacity. If I knock it down, so it's 18 at the moment, it doesn't completely knock it out. So I can actually, I even take it down lower than that. So it means that I can, if you listen, kind of click and drag. So it takes a while clicking and dragging to blend that image out. And obviously you can see here that it's the end of the lizard. So I'm going to go X with white and paint that back in so that I don't see that edge quite so much. Smaller brush. X, try and take out that little bit again. So just combine it, trying to combine those images a wee bit. What else have we got? We've got one more, a car. So I'll just do it. Quickly here. So I've got the car. See how that object selection tool works with the car. Oh, not too bad. Command plus. It's a little bit of a fudgy bit here. Quick selection paintbrush, option tool. Oh, and it's gone too far. So shift. See if I can paint the edge of that car back in. Sometimes, and then back to option. Sometimes because it's trying to evaluate what you're after, you have to work back and forth. You know, use the shift key if it goes too far, use the option key and eat back into it. And eventually the program starts to work out what it is that you're actually after, what the object is. Unlock it, quick mask, get the arrow key and chuck that car in, and then just, whoops, get it to the area where I want it. And I'm going to show you, so Command T, let's make it a bit bigger, return. I'm going to show you one more layering option that can be pretty interesting, and that's if I double click on this layer, you get this big slider that comes in. So the top bar here of the blend is dealing with the car image. The underlying layer is whatever is underneath the car. So if I move the slider, it's going to say the darkest areas of the car will disappear first. If I move this one, the lightest areas. So you're going to see it disappear up here first. So the bottom is going to be the darkest areas underneath the car will show through first. So this will mean the pole will come through first because it's almost pitch black. The lightest areas will come through. So I'm not quite sure what it will see as the lightest. Maybe the t-shirt, the lizard. Oops. There we go. It wasn't showing me a preview, so I have to click and drag. So yeah, the t-shirt comes through with the lizard. Now, if I Command plus up on it, you'll see it's quite pixelated. It's because the slider, it gets to a certain point and then it says that's where we're stopping. If I hold down the Option key, I can split that. And what it's going to do is it's going to soften that transition. So it says cut everything out until here and then slowly transition to here. So let's have a look. So it's doing it, but it's softening. And of course, this gets really, really full on because that's dealing with the underlying layer. But if I want to get rid of the light areas on the car, I can move that slider as well. And I can Option split that. I can drop the blacks a little bit. So it is starting to get pretty intense. And then I still have a mask attached to it. So for me, I look at this and I think, oh, that's kind of interesting, but this is a bit mucky. I don't like it on the blue. I want to keep it a bit clear. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the mask, get a paintbrush, make it about 80 something for the hardness, left square bracket to make it smaller, and with black, whoops, oh, it's still on the 9% opacity. I want that back up to 100. Wondered what was going on. I can paint it out. It's only working with the mask, so I don't have to worry about bumping into Henry or anything else. It's only working with the mask on the car. Oops. So we're starting to control it a little bit more. So you can start to get some pretty complex things coming out of that. Now, just for a moment, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm just going to